A massive immigration raid in the US state of Georgia appears to have set President Trump's border policies against his push to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Last Thursday, officers from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, targeted a Hyundai factory. They arrested 475 people, most of them South Korean nationals. ICE has stepped up workplace raids as part of President Trump's anti-immigration agenda and says this was its biggest ever. After the raid, the president said there were a lot of illegal aliens at the site and called on foreign companies to respect US immigration laws. Let's pick up a couple of those points with journalist Eric Bazail-Eimil, who was reporting on this story for Politico. Welcome to DW, Eric. Why did ICE target this Hyundai plant?
This has been a long-standing operation per immigration officials in the United States that had been planned with multiple agencies. It seems that they had received a tip from somebody in the community that there were undocumented immigrants working at the plant. We saw an arrest warrant from the Justice Department that targeted 4 individuals, but those individuals were not Korean, so it's unclear if, there was the claim was that there was some kind of effort to smuggle in migrants and that these 4 people that were targets of the arrest warrants were implicated in that, but it's unclear if that involved the Korean nationals or not, if they were collateral simply for an extra part of this operation. But it seems that this had been something the administration had been planning and coordinating for a while with lots of different agencies as part of its effort, as you pointed out, to crack down on workplace visa fraud.
Right. I want you to try and control my conspiracy thinking here, because this plant was exactly the sort of foreign investment Donald Trump claims he wants. So is there a conflict between this and his apparent anti-immigrant stance? Are we seeing power players jostling for position at the court of King Donald?
There's certainly many worries about that in Washington, Democrats especially, and former policy officials who have worked extensively in East Asia say that this is exactly the opposite kind of business and investment climate that the U.S. wants to be creating right now, especially as it's trying to bring some of these critical supply chains closer to home. Of course, the administration is very much downplaying those kinds of claims. Yesterday, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem was in London, and she said that it's not having a chilling effect and that America is still, a beacon of investment, and that this was she indicated that this was a one-time situation, specifically to target a company that had been, abusing the laws of the United States. The president's Truth Social post on Sunday caused a little bit more ambiguity there. So it's very unclear to see what exactly the investment landscape is going to look like. But there is certainly a contradiction that, the president's critics are raising here in Washington.
This raid also swept up a number of actual US citizens and people whose documentation was completely in order. What does this tell us about the way US Customs and Immigration Enforcement is operating under this administration?
The administration themselves will say that they're trying to act very quickly and act very decisively. And to its critics, this approach to immigration enforcement has been characterized as, you'll smash things and pick them up later. Right now, this is, the fact that some Americans or people that were here lawfully and had authorization to be working in the plant were also picked up in it. Maybe they didn't have their passport or their specific form on hand that day. It does feed into what critics of the administration have said has been this kind of wanton and very, impulsive approach towards immigration enforcement. But to the administration's perspective on this, they say that it's necessary to meet the ambitious targets that the president has set to control undocumented immigration into the United States and to restore an immigration system that it argues is fundamentally broken and is ripping off American workers.
OK, so the White House said this hasn't damaged relations with South Korea. How important is South Korea as a business partner for the US?
It's one of the largest trading partners of the United States, and even many of its connections, its national security transactions are incredibly important. Its work on sensitive technologies. South Korean companies and U.S. companies collaborate all the time. South Korea is one of the largest purchasers of U.S. weapons and weapons systems. So this is a very complex and interdependent relationship. The amount of consumer products in the United States that are produced in Korea is very, very large. And, so on a business perspective alone, not factoring in South Korea's role role in countering a nuclear North Korea, the relationship with China, what the last administration called the latticework of alliances in the Indo-Pacific. South Korea plays an incredibly important role for the United States as it looks to Asia and its future in the global economy and the world stage.
Good talking to you, Eric. Thanks for talking us through that. That's journalist Eric Bazail-Eimil from Politico. Immigration lawyer Charles Kuck is representing some of the detained South Korean workers. Welcome to DW. And tell us what happened to your clients last week. They turned up to work as normal, then what happened?
That morning, ICE showed up with a number of buses and a judicially issued search warrant, specifically looking for 4 Latino workers that were supposedly on the site that were undocumented. Much to ICE's surprise, there was also 300 Koreans working in the plant that they did not anticipate seeing. We know that because they didn't bring any Korean interpreters with them, and most of these folks did not speak English. ICE then began arresting all of the Korean workers who were there on business visitor visas or under the ESTA program, even though they were authorized to be at the plant under the ESTA program and were not violating their status. I think that's what's caused much of the ruckus today with the government of Korea. Is in fact we had invited these workers here, and now we were arresting them.
OK, and we've seen pictures of them in handcuffs and quite humiliating conditions. Tell us about the conditions that they were put into.
Well, they were sent to the Folkestone Immigration Processing Center, which is in fact a jail. So just like you'd picture any jail in the United States, this is exactly like this. The jail is not set up to receive Korean visitors or Korean prisoners. They didn't have any Korean speakers on staff, and they certainly weren't giving the food that most Koreans were willing and used to eating, which is what has made their stay there extraordinarily difficult.
And to be absolutely clear, as far as you're concerned, your clients were in the US legally and working legally.
That is correct. They were doing exactly what is authorized under the ESTA or the B1 program, and that's after sales installation of equipment and service of that equipment that was purchased from abroad.
So I'm intrigued by this. So these ICE agents come looking for 4 Latinos, end up arresting several hundred South Koreans. So what was the pivot there? They say, we're looking for these 4 guys, but we'll take all of you.
Well, I guess they had to fill the buses that they brought. And certainly there's a lot of pressure on the ICE folks to arrest as many people as possible to meet this administration's goal of 3,000 arrests per day. So they saw it easy to arrest people that never should have been arrested, but whom they can count on their arrest statistics.
Right. But as you understand it, you say they turned up with a warrant. What was the basis for them arresting these several hundred South Korean people?
That's a little unclear at this point why they arrested these individuals. We are guessing that they simply did not understand that individuals on visitor visas could be at the plant performing services. These agents that were arresting individuals, many weren't from ICE. They were from other federal law enforcement agencies with no immigration experience. And this specific part of ICE actually was the employer sanctions part, those that look at worksite issues on employment. Right. They weren't the visa folks. So our guess is they just didn't understand how these visas worked and just presumed that they were illegal.
Here's the thing, though. You say it's quite clear, and they were conducting work that is permitted under these B1 business visas. Except that there does seem to be some dispute or indeed question of interpretation about those visas, because, you know, I've heard from and read about the president of a local labour union complaining that Hyundai and its contractors were improperly using South Korean workers for basic construction that falls outside the visa waiver rules.
None of the individuals that I'm representing were involved in anything other than the installation of the equipment that originated from outside the United States. And to my knowledge, there weren't any actual Koreans working on the physical building of this plant. Keep in mind, this is a plant that was under construction. It wasn't a plant that's operating and creating batteries. So the equipment inside that plant came from Japan, Korea, and other countries outside the United States. And the Koreans that were there were specifically on assignment to install and service that, or several of our clients were just literally in a meeting room going over the aspects of the project and were only there for a week or so before they went back to Korea.
How has this experience affected your clients?
Oh, this has been a terrible experience for them. ICE will ultimately allow most of these folks to leave voluntarily and is saying they can come back when they want to. My guess is very few will want to come back to the United States. This has been a terrible, degrading, humiliating experience.
So the deal, as I understand it, has been done. South Korea, the United States have spoken. South Korea is to take their countrymen home. So what's your role in this? Beyond getting your clients released, what do you want?
Well, we still have several clients that will not be on that airplane. That were lawfully in the United States, and in fact, we're working legally. So we're still working for those individuals, including a couple of Latinos that were arrested that in fact had lawful work authorization. Our role is to make sure that we push ICE fast enough to get these folks out of jail. Part of the problem seems to have been that ICE was simply unprepared for the volume of people that are arrested and cannot adequately process them in a timely fashion.
Can we just touch on the politics of this? Because I think it's going to blow a lot of people's minds that this massive raid has happened at a massive factory being constructed in Georgia, a state that was actively courting inward foreign investment in a country that we know is keen to see the return of manufacturing, especially in a technology producing electric vehicle batteries, which the US's sworn enemy, China, has come to dominate. These seem to be exactly the sort of people that one branch of the White House wants, while, of course, you have this clampdown on immigration from another branch of the White House.
Now, the White House is very schizophrenic on this issue. In fact, President Trump, in his own statement on this on Sunday, acknowledged that he thought these guys were legally here, but then in the same sentence says we need to deport illegal workers. The White House itself is at odds on what it needs to be doing to accomplish its goals, like creating and bringing foreign investment to the United States, but somehow not bringing their workers to teach our workers how to create these products. That ultimately is the issue here, is that the United States has failed to keep up with China and other countries in the development of this level of technology for something that is in great demand in the United States. So politically, this is a fraught issue, and it's not just about somebody taking construction jobs from a local contractor. This is about much bigger geopolitical issues.
So to South Korean workers at home thinking about picking up a contract in the United States with their valuable skills, what would be your advice to them about coming to the US?
First piece of advice is if you are going to do this, make sure you talk to your employer's immigration lawyers to make sure you're in the United States in the appropriate status and on the appropriate visa. And second, understand that even if you are, there can be problems with ICE.
Good talking to you. Thanks for joining us, US immigration lawyer Charles Kuck.
Thank you.